The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So I want to talk about something today that's kind of a follow-up of a topic that's been increasingly important in the era of government in which we currently find ourselves, which is activism and this sort of feeling of helplessness that many of us understandably have. What can we actually do to affect change and to get the government? And it's really kind of a partnership between government and industry to listen to us, to just listen to people. And a lot of our viewers and listeners write in, and there's a theme to those emails, which is signing petitions doesn't really work. Voting is important. Calling our elected officials matters. But what else can we actually do to protest and to activate and to try to get change to take place in a way that would actually be good for the general public and the population? And there's a number of interesting works, papers, books on this topic that I've recently been looking at. And to remind you of where we kind of left this conversation before, the argument that we've been working with, or that I've been working with anyway, is that various forms of nonviolent resistance, I believe, in the long term, are more effective than violence. We're more likely to win agreement and be able to engage in negotiation with government and industry when we use nonviolent means of resistance than violent. Now, understandably, sometimes you are activating in opposition to actions by government or industry that can be, even if not physically violent, politically violent, or violent in the detrimental impact that they have on people. And so I completely understand that in history, there have been times for violent resistance. But to kind of recap for our conversation, I believe that we are going to be more effective activists if we do the right type of nonviolent resistance. The two methods or tactics that I previously have talked about a bunch of times now are civil disobedience and general strikes. We've already talked about those before. The idea of using general strikes and civil disobedience to cripple large swaths of government and industry in a way that would be very difficult to ignore. It doesn't guarantee, and I apologize as I punch my mic because I'm starting to get wound up in anticipation of the rest of the story. It doesn't guarantee that the activism will have the results we necessarily want, but they are means that will be much more effective in getting a response than simply signing petitions online. But I have other ideas to talk to you about today. Now, full disclaimer, most people literally can't afford to do the stuff I'm about to tell you. Most people are at huge risk, put themselves at huge risk to your own finances, to the finances of your family, to your own existence as sort of a free person in society. But the idea is that with all of the tactics I'm about to tell you, to discuss with you, if everyone does it or a large number of people do it, you're less likely to be targeted as an individual for doing it, and it will very quickly cripple systems that society depends on, and it may get the negotiating powers to the table to really look at affecting change. So again, most people aren't willing to do this stuff. Right now, I'm mostly also not willing to do a lot of these things because of the risk that's associated with it. But it's good to know that there are more things you can do other than write your elected officials and show up at a rally and sign petitions online and vote. If the system works poorly enough, more and more people will be willing to take it to the next level nonviolently. And some examples include strategic defaulting. Okay, strategic defaulting is when a borrower makes a decision to stop making their payments. Mostly we're talking about mortgages when we talk about strategic defaulting. Economists consider that a concerted strategic defaulting effort in the mortgage industry would collapse the banking industry unless there were massive government bailouts, and you would very quickly get both the financial industry, which is responsible for many of the problems we're dealing with, and the government to say, we've got to do something, and it can't just be starting to ding the credit reports of all these people. If enough people do it, okay, that's the key thing. Class action lawsuits can be used as activism if you have enough activist lawyers willing to file them, class action lawsuits against industry for their destruction of public resources, maltreatment of public individuals and customers. Class action lawsuits can be used en masse to cripple both companies and the court system, but you need a concerted effort to actually do it. Mass rallies in urban areas, but to such a concerted degree that the cities are effectively shut down. If this happens in one place, sort of, authorities can kind of keep the system moving. If the largest 20 cities in the United States are flooded with people for mass rallies, everything from public transit to business gets overwhelmed. People can't go to work. Don't have to be violent, but we've got to be there rallying. You will very quickly see that the system cannot simply ignore that. Stopping all non-necessary financial consumption. This means no new iPhone unless yours literally doesn't work anymore. No eating out. You buy the minimum groceries necessary. This will have a massive impact on the economy right away. Withholding scheduled payments beyond mortgages. We talked about strategic defaults on mortgages. This could be withholding rent payments, utility payments, general fiscal noncompliance. Stop paying speeding tickets and property taxes. And again, if one person does it, if a few people do it, they just get penalized for it. If enough people do it, this stuff will cripple the systems that are in charge of the financial system and that are dependent on those payments coming in. Now, what's important to understand here, Pat, is that in the short term, a lot of these types of activism can actually hurt people who are doing the activism. It can hurt workers via layoffs. It can hurt small businesses. But eventually, if coordinated in large quantities, these are types of protests that will force the government and industry to act. Will it work? Not necessarily, but my point here is it's good to know that you can do more than just vote, sign petitions, and call your elected officials.
Not too long ago, I read Nelson Mandela's memoir, A Long Walk to Freedom, and he talked about the 4 types of violent activism. Those included everything from sabotage to guerrilla warfare to terrorism and all the way to outright revolution. Now, I would never advocate for those last 3, and certainly apartheid South Africa is far different than what we have here in Trump's America today. But sabotage, that's an interesting one because that has to do with just tearing down government property, obstructing roadways, vandalism. I guess you could say it's violent, but it's not violent against particular people. Is that something, not certainly that you would endorse, but that you would put on the table as something that could be effective, that could work?
Well, the thing is, the tactics you listed, some I think would be over the line and are clearly violent, and some would sort of be on this side of the line. So I think we'd have to sort of evaluate exactly which tactic we are talking about. Destruction of government property would be one thing. Peaceful obstruction of roadways, I think, is a different one. But you're thinking along the lines of how do we categorize these different types of activism? And my message to you here is that there are other tactics available. If and when it's time to use them is sort of a gray area that we can kind of continue having a conversation about. The Trump administration has been one exercise in projection after another. Hillary was going to get us into wars, but it's actually Trump considering military action over the last 2 years in North Korea, in Iran, in Venezuela, actually taking action in Syria. Hillary was going to end up in prison for all of her crimes, except that it's actually Trump associates ending up in prison, and it's Trump who's under more than 12 or 15, I don't even know the number, investigations at this point. Hillary used private email. Well, half of Trump's staff has been caught using private email at this point. Hillary mishandled classified and secret information, except Trump spilled secrets to a Russian spy recruiter in the Oval Office, secrets that we learned from another ally of ours, and now it continues. Donald Trump has exposed the location and identities of members of Navy SEAL Team 5 on Twitter. You might recall that Donald Trump had never been to visit troops stationed in combat zones. For nearly 2 years of his presidency, this is something that previous presidents did routinely. Trump didn't do it, and we heard from a senior White House official that Trump wasn't doing it merely because he was afraid of getting killed. Which gets us to yesterday. On day 5 of the government shutdown that Trump caused, in the midst of a spiraling presidency, Donald Trump decided to show up in a combat zone. News of the trip was kept sort of quiet to maintain safety in Iraq, which is where Donald Trump went. That's fine. So step one is that Trump asked to take a picture with Lieutenant Commander Q Lee, who's the chaplain of SEAL Team 5, which reveals that SEAL Team 5, which is a very sensitive military team, was at the Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq. Not ideal. But okay, this is just the chaplain. We don't know exactly who else is part of this group or anything about it. But then Donald Trump leaves Iraqi airspace and posts a video to Twitter of him and Melania standing for pictures with multiple members of SEAL Team 5. We're supposed to keep the locations of Special Forces secret. We're supposed to keep the identities of Special Forces secret. A Department of Defense official said to Newsweek that, quote, even during special ops demonstrations for congressional delegations or for the president or vice president, personnel either have their faces covered or their faces are digitally blurred prior to anything being released to the general public. That didn't happen. Trump has revealed the identities of some of the people that our enemies would most like to target. And even if you disagree with the missions undertaken by our military, and I disagree with many of the missions undertaken by our military, they didn't sign up to have the president tweet unblurred pictures of their faces on the internet. Trump spilling secrets in the Oval Office, using an unsecured iPhone, which we suspect foreign powers have been working to intercept and may have successfully intercepted. And now he exposes the faces, which lead, of course, to their names and the location of SEAL Team 5 members. Any foreign intel agency that has the technological level of development that China has would be able to start backtracking the movements of some of these individuals to figure out, using CCTV and other footage, what have they been up to? Where have these individuals been? Trump is outing some of the most sensitive military operators, and Pat, it's all to make himself feel alpha and big and strong. It's the publishing of sensitive data that's a threat to national security. Legally, he's not liable. Anything the president wants to make public, he can make public, and it's effectively declassified. But this is an entire trip during a government shutdown to get Trump somewhere where he can brag about how great and brave he is, and he exposes high-level military operatives.
Yeah, this should not happen. We need to pass laws to make sure that it doesn't happen, and there should be more safeguards in place. The president shouldn't just be able to take a video and post it directly to his iPhone. I'd like to see more people handle the video first before it goes out to the public. I remember there was much to do about Obama giving up his BlackBerry when he became president-elect back in 08, 09. And I guess he did willingly give the phone up. It sounded as if they were forcing him to, but apparently he could have kept it if he wanted to. Obama sacrificed his BlackBerry knowing that it would be good for the country and safe for the country if he did so. Trump would not ever in a million years consider doing that. You have to force him into it.
And I don't like sanitized social media use by elected officials, but this is an example of why maybe you do need lawyers to manage the social media of the president, because this is an absolute and utter atrocity. Send me your thoughts on Twitter at dpakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. Second to last show of 2018.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day, the second to last new member of the day of the year, because it's the second to last show of the year for us, is Colin Bulkley. Colin, thank you for being a supporter of the show. Today's longtime sustaining member is Jamie Ainsley, who's been with us nearly 5 years. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. Coupon code is available, saves you 40%. This is 2020. And if you want something extra special, if you want the biggest membership discount of the year, get on our mailing list at davidpakman.com. January 1st, email blast will go out with an opportunity, a single day opportunity to take advantage of the biggest membership discount of the year. The David Pakman Show has a discussion forum of sorts. It's on Reddit at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. About 8,000 of our viewers and listeners discuss politics there. And there were a number of interesting stories I spotted this morning when taking a look at the subreddit, including the news that Kevin Spacey is now facing felony charges for sexual assault. A Massachusetts district court has issued a criminal complaint against Kevin Spacey for allegedly sexually assaulting an 18-year-old. Multiple men have come forward with accusations of sexual assault and harassment against Spacey. You know, Pat, it started just with the abrupt refilming and end of House of Cards because of allegations of sexual assault against Kevin Spacey. This has now exploded, and this is not looking good at all for Kevin Spacey. Initially, the question was, these are allegations that seem to all exceed the statute of limitations. Now you actually do have a criminal complaint that's been accepted in Massachusetts. It's not looking like a good ride into the sunset for Kevin Spacey, is it?
Did you see the video that Kevin Spacey put out a few days ago? He was in character as Frank Underwood, trying to dismiss some of the allegations. It was really, really bizarre. I don't know if you've seen that.
That sounds incredibly strange.
It was weird.
And I didn't see that. I'm going to look for that, though. So things are not looking great for Kevin Spacey, and it's being pointed out on the David Pakman Show subreddit. Also from the subreddit, a post saying that there is a linking to an article in the Washington Post, which points out that Donald Trump's campaign manager, the new one, is asking people to call a hotline that's been set up to say, "Thank you, President Trump." Is there anything more special snowflake than needing to hear people leave voice messages praising you and thanking you? And of course, the answer is, we know that this guy is an incredibly sensitive special snowflake, to take a term from the right that I don't really use, but I'm using satirically, because we know that he gets his propaganda a clock file 2 times a day on normal days. I don't know if that frequency has been increased, of him just looking powerful in pictures that have been used in media and good lower third headlines from Fox News and other right-wing media. Just absolutely stunning that this is what your campaign manager is even doing to keep you sort of satiated, having people call in and leave voicemail messages talking about how great you are. Just absolutely pathetic. And lastly, from the David Pakman Show subreddit, Thom Hartmann says the United States should stay in Syria to protect the Kurds. Yeah, strictly speaking, as I mentioned yesterday, it's a fallacy to say something is right because X person is saying it. But at this point, we should consider why it is that people from the left, like Noam Chomsky and Thom Hartmann, are saying, even if we're generally against United States military intervention, we can still point out that the haphazard and erratic withdrawal of U.S. troops from Syria is not something that makes particular sense. And as I mentioned, both yesterday, Noam Chomsky, and today, Thom Hartmann are of that mindset. Some people emailed me and said, David, you know, you could just be against military intervention regardless of why it is that Trump is getting out. Getting out is the right thing, to which I would say that's perfectly fine, but you still want to look into whether the guy's been blackmailed or there is foul play, right? I hope that the answer there is yes. Join the discussion, davidpakman.com/REDDIT. Don't troll. We have moderators, and they are fully deputized to prevent trolling on our subreddit. Okay, Democrats are wasting no time in starting to mess up the 2020 primary and potentially even the 2020 presidential election with bogus articles stirring up unnecessary and concocted drama. And I want to walk you through this story step by step because it's sort of complex, although I'm confident we'll all be able to understand it. So let's go to the beginning. A story was published. Well, if we want to go to the beginning, Bernie was screwed in the 2016 Democratic primary. That's the context in which we're operating here. A story was published over our holiday week, holiday weekend break, I guess we would call it, on NBC News, called Inside Bernie World's War on Beto O'Rourke. And the article is written by Jonathan Allen and Alex Seitz-Wald. And I've actually interviewed Alex Seitz-Wald before. I interviewed him on the program back in 2012 about Mitt Romney's campaign. At the time, Alex was a staff writer at Salon.com. This article that was written by Jonathan Allen and Alex Seitz-Wald claims that there are sort of Bernie-aligned leftists, supporters of Bernie, and it sort of indirectly sort of hints that maybe there's more than just supporters of Bernie that are involved here, who are waging some kind of war on Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic candidate for Senate out of Texas who lost to Ted Cruz in the November midterm elections. And it frames these Bernie supporters very negatively and says that, Bernie supporters are claiming Beto's not progressive enough, that he's close to corporate donors, that he sometimes votes for Republicans, all of which are true, by the way, but are also true of other centrist Democrats as well. And we'll get to that. And what this article claims to make the case for is that the Democratic primary is already shaping up to be really, really ugly. Of course, before we even know who's running yet. We don't know if Bernie's running, although I believe that he is going to. We don't know if Beto O'Rourke is running. We don't know if Hillary Clinton is running, and that's relevant, and we'll get to why in a second. And the article says that this fight is counterproductive. Now, a lot of the claims being made in the article aren't crazy in and of themselves. Questioning how progressive is Beto O'Rourke is a completely reasonable thing to do. Looking at whether Democrats are going to be hurt by an ugly primary is a completely valid question to ask and discussion to have. But our friend and investigative reporter David Sirota has exposed that the article claiming that there is a Bernie wing war on Beto O'Rourke is itself a trumped up fake fight. David Sirota took to Twitter and said, "This NBC News story accusing Bernie of waging a war on Beto was written by a former staffer for Debbie Wasserman Schultz and a former staffer at Neera Tanden's Center for American Progress." The idea being, this is establishment Dems trying to criticize Bernie by saying his followers are unfairly attacking Beto O'Rourke. And when you look into it, you do find that Alex Seitzwald is an assistant editor at thinkprogress.org, which is part of the Center for American Progress's Action Fund, which is a main player in the Democratic Party establishment at this point. It is indeed headed by Neera Tanden, a member of Hillary Clinton's advisors in the 2016 primaries. The other author of the article, Jonathan Allen, worked for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the DNC chair. So this article contains some truisms. It contains, some statements that are, of course, true, but not particularly meaningful just because they're true. It is a bad idea for possible Democratic candidates to start attacking each other now, right? That's true if it's what's happening. It's just not actually what's going on. It's written by individuals tied to the establishment Democratic Party, associated with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary Clinton, who were working against Bernie Sanders for the entire 2016 campaign. So the problem I have with this, Pat, number one, is that it doesn't actually call out real infighting that's taking place. This is a fake war by Bernie supporters on Beto O'Rourke. It is true that there's a growing contingent on the internet that has decided Beto O'Rourke is just not really a progressive guy. He's a sort of secret establishment centrist who must be taken down for his occasional voting with Republicans. I'm fine having the conversation about how progressive is Beto O'Rourke, and we had the conversation, and I determined he's way better than Ted Cruz, and we should obviously vote for him in Texas. But the idea of a Bernie supporter war on Beto written by these particular people stinks of AstroTurf to me.
Me too. I think when the 2020 presidential race does come around, there's going to be a wide pool of Democratic candidates, and you're going to have some establishment types in there, maybe like Beto O'Rourke, and you're going to have some progressives in there, maybe like Bernie Sanders. And there'll probably be some infighting at that point, and that could be healthy. There's an argument to be made that that's actually good for the party. But it has to happen naturally. It has to be organic. I mean, you can't just stage something like this.
No question about it. Look, during the Republican primary, which started with 17 candidates, there was significant infighting. And ultimately, the party rallied around the wacky, inexperienced, totally clueless person that won the nomination, which was Donald Trump. And the discussions that were taking place within the Republican primary were often based on the physical appearance of people, but and nicknaming them. But that's okay. I mean, it's still just an example of the fact that that internal debate can happen when it's actually taking place. That's fine to report on it. This is not actually happening. There is no big Bernie attack or war on Beto. There are just reasonable people who may have voted for Hillary Clinton or Bernie or whoever, who are evaluating possible candidates and sometimes giving their opinion. And the truth is, of course, rarely as black and white as either this is fake AstroTurf drama or this is real. Beto's not the perfect candidate. He lost in 2018. There are many options for 2020 for Democrats who could be better than Beto O'Rourke. But Beto O'Rourke is not the problem. Bernie Sanders supporters are not the problem. And Democrats need to start working now to prevent the 2020 primary from being destroyed, possibly in even worse ways than the 2016 primary was destroyed. Send me your thoughts if you have questions about this or anything else. I've been taking questions on the David Pakman Show Instagram page for the last 24 hours. I will be taking them for a few more hours. Follow the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. And while you're there, follow me at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We're continuing our conversation today with Major Richard Ojeda, who's a highly decorated 24-year Army veteran, West Virginia state senator. He is running for president in 2020 on the Democratic side. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the 2020 campaign, electability, other candidates. Talk a little bit about the strategy for states like my state, Massachusetts, for example, where in early polls, folks like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are sort of at the top of that early presidential polling. What is the case to be made as to why a progressive Massachusetts voter should support Richard Ojeda, who admittedly has a number of progressive policies today, but as you said, did vote for Donald Trump in 2016, is more of a moderate, down-the-middle guy, as you mentioned yesterday. What's the case for that voter to support you over some of the great options that already are on the table as possible candidates?
Well, I think that, the thing is once the people get an opportunity to meet me, to hear the things that I'm saying, I think that they will agree with me. Right now, everybody knows that you're going to have a few people that are going to throw their hat in the ring. Mm-hmm. And these are lifetime politicians. They have no concept of what life is like to the working class citizen out there. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and say it. A lot of them are not real Democrats, because I believe what a real Democrat is a person who puts working class citizens first.
Yeah, but that seems, I mean, I'm not your political advisor by any means, but that seems like risky territory to talk about who's a real Democrat, because people could say, well, hold on a second. Richard Ojeda voted for Trump in 2016. Is he really a real Democrat?
Absolutely. I am a real Democrat because I care about the working class citizens. I voted for Trump, which I regret to this day, but make no mistake, I voted for Trump because I was putting the working class citizens first. It wasn't about me. It was about the people in where I live and wanting to make sure that they can continue putting food on the table. It's about supporting unions. You're not going to find anybody that's more fiercely supportive of unions than I am. That's a fact. I don't care who throws their hat in the ring, and I guarantee you labor unions will be able to tell you that. It's taking care of our elderly. And I mean by stop allowing these people to put their hands in the cookie jar of Social Security. I'm willing to raise the cap on Social Security. Okay.
What would you raise it to? That's an interesting, we've been talking about that for a while. What would you get rid of the cap altogether or raise it to a particular number?
It wouldn't bother me to get rid of the cap altogether. Mm-hmm. Everybody pays their fair share. But I mean, once again, if we got rid of the cap, Social Security would be here not only for our children, but if we got rid of the cap, so imagine what could be done with Social Security.
What would you do in terms of taxation? What do you think about the tax brackets that are currently in place? How would you change that? Would you make the system more progressive, less progressive?
Well, in terms of taxes, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem raising taxes if it's going to go for a good cause. Okay. In terms of these, tax breaks and tax cuts that are always for the top 1%, I'm not in favor of all that. I think that, the average citizen out here are the ones that are struggling. This big tax break that was just given to the top 1% out there, that's going to be great for them. But for the average citizen, our stuff's going to sunset here pretty soon and we'll have nothing. I think that we need to be equal across the board, let everybody be able to keep their capabilities for the long term. But, like I said, I don't have a problem raising taxes if it's going to go for a good cause.
How high do you think that the highest bracket should be?
How much money can a person make? To me, everybody pay their equal share of taxes.
Right. But what I'm saying is, would you like to see a 50% top marginal tax rate, 75%? At what income would that kick in? Should there be a special rate for people earning over $10 million a year, $100 million a year?
Well, you mean a special rate? You mean a special, when you say special rate, what do you mean?
I mean that you would create a bracket, a marginal tax rate, where even if the sort of, 39.5% kicks in at 400,000, that you would say, okay, if your income is over 20 million a year, every dollar over 20 million, you will pay 70% or 75%. Is that something you would be in favor of, or does that seem too high to you?
I'd have to look at those things right there. Like I said, I'm that's one of the things that I really need to focus and do some more research on.
Fair enough.
I don't want to go ahead and give you an answer on something.
Yeah.
And then later on down the road, figure out another plan or something like that. But once again, I think that everybody needs to pay their fair share. We keep giving tax breaks to the top 1% in this country, and the bottom are the ones that are carrying everything on their backs. So, I want to make sure that it's more even across the board.
Geopolitically, shifting gears a little bit, when you see what's happening in Syria, Donald Trump deciding to pull troops from Syria just after we were told troops would be staying in Syria for some time. You've got General Wesley Clark now saying he's hearing from allies that they're wondering whether maybe Trump was blackmailed or given a payoff to do this, because it seems to go completely counter to both logic and what we saw said by the Secretary of Defense before his resignation and subsequent "you can't quit because I'm firing you" incident. What do you see as the right path in Syria?
Well, number one, it's listening to, the military minds. And obviously, Donald Trump does not do that. And I believe it's probably one of the reasons why, General Mattis is going ahead and stepping away. I think nothing surprises me when it comes to Donald Trump about his decisions that he makes. Obviously, he thinks that he knows more about, what's going on in Syria than the people that, are on the ground over there. I think it's a big mistake. Look, it's okay for us to be in places to be able to help protect our allies, the Kurdish people who have always been with us, and we believe that if we pull away from there, it will not be long, and somebody's going to come in there and they're probably going to absolutely annihilate the Kurdish people. But once again, these are people who've stood with us for a long time, all the way back to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But I want to go ahead and say also that I'm not for spending, decades in countries doing things like, building roads and things like that, when we don't really have a major reason to actually be spending that kind of money and putting those kind of boots on the ground in places like that. But in places like what we have in Syria, I think that it is absolutely a bad move to pull our troops out of there, especially when the people on the ground are saying, no, please don't.
Did you support initially going into Syria? Because I think that there's two different questions there. I think that a principled progressive can say, I was not in favor of going in the first place, but now that we're there, there needs to be a strategic reason to leave and to leave now, and we want to make sure that we know what the reasons are that we're leaving. What was your initial position on going into Syria?
Well, look, I don't have an issue going in. If we're talking about going in and getting people like ISIS, I have no issues at all, because these are people that, if you don't crush them, they will rebuild and they will come at you. I have no problems going into a place, like Syria, to be able to wipe out, organizations like ISIS, Al Qaeda, and things like that. But, like I said, once you're there, let's listen to the people that have boots on the ground. Let's not pull people out unless we know it's the right thing to do. I hate to say it, we pulled out of Iraq. What happened when we pulled out of Iraq? They took right back over. They took back the cities.
That's interesting. So when it came to Iraq, what was your position on the initial invasion in 2003?
Well, I was in the military. I was a company commander at that time. To me, I was deploying in the service of this nation. I was proud to go. It was when I got to Iraq and I started looking around and I realized that, money is what controls everything. You see, things that are going on over there. At the time in 2004, 2005, I believe there was 163,000+ troops on the ground. And, we were paying $200 per troop per day for food. I don't know of anybody who was eating that kind of food over there, period. But yet we were paying that kind of money. It doesn't take long to realize that we're here. We may be here to fight an enemy, but we're also here because somebody is putting a lot of money in the pockets of contractors. And that's exactly what it was. And I believe that's why we're still in Afghanistan building roads in places where 90% of the people don't even own a car.
Yeah, the issue, I'm sort of glad you brought up Iraq because it gets us to sort of another issue that's both a geopolitics issue, but also an environment issue and a domestic issue, which is that of oil and fossil fuels and climate change. And I'm curious, in part one of the interview, you talked yesterday about how the pro-coal rhetoric from Trump was appealing to you initially, although, of course, you now realize that it was a total farce. How do you see approaching the issue of fossil fuels in the United States, given that you are a state senator in West Virginia, a state that's heavily dependent on fossil fuel revenue, considering the way in which our relationship with Saudi Arabia is influenced by the fact that they have us figuratively and literally over a barrel when it comes to oil? What would be your approach to fossil fuels? Do you want to get us off of fossil fuels, and if so, how?
Absolutely. I support the Green New Deal wholeheartedly. I just wish it was now. Let's bring those green jobs to places like West Virginia so our coal miners can transition over and start getting those jobs. We know that we're almost at the point where we're at the point of no return, where if we go past this date, 2035, let's say it's 2035, there's no turning back. We might as well just sit and watch the earth die around us. We have the ability right now to turn directions, and we've got to do it. Look, I understand, metallurgical coal is coal that creates steel. We need steel production because we have infrastructure issues. We've got a military might that's been going for 18 straight years. But let me tell you something, coal as an energy source is gone. And we need to transition. I just don't want us to pull the plug on it before we look at these people out here and provide them with opportunities to feed their family. And they need more than Wendy's and McDonald's to do so. Let's bring those green energy jobs to West Virginia now. Wind, solar, you name it, we want it. We can build solar panels. Bring it to West Virginia. Let's allow my people to transition, and let's go ahead and get away from all fossil fuels.
Part of why that doesn't happen as quickly as maybe it otherwise would is because of subsidies on fossil fuels. Would you pull those subsidies?
Yes, I would.
And what about the argument that many employers in your state of West Virginia will make that is going to kill thousands of jobs?
I will tell them that's why it's important for all of us to get together and say, let's get these green jobs down here now. Once again, we have a line. And if we cross that line, we might as well sit and watch the earth die around us. We cannot allow us to get to that line. So let's go ahead and change directions.
Well, I agree with you. I worry that may not be may not be welcomed as warmly in West Virginia as it would in Boston, Massachusetts. But how could I possibly disagree?
But that's the thing. Look, just because I'm from West Virginia doesn't mean I'm going to go down with the ship. I support I love my state. And I love the people within my state. But, I also, want to see us all survive. And I think that we can. Let's bring those capabilities to West Virginia. So if we transition those coal miners to decent jobs that pay well, that they can provide their family with, they will be very pleased with that. You're not going to find a coal miner that says, I can't wait when my son turns 18 years old so he can follow me down that mine. The coal miners want more for their children. They want that. And we need to be able to provide them with that.
Certainly can't argue with that. We've been speaking with Major Richard Ojeda, who's a highly decorated 24-year Army veteran, West Virginia state senator, and he's running for president in 2020. Richard, really a pleasure having you on. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So I have major follow-up on last week's sort of Twitter battle that I had with an activist, and it got really ugly, including the attempt to get me fired from my adjunct faculty position at Boston College. It involves Joe Rogan. It involves comedian Bill Burr. So the backstory on this entire thing, to catch you up, is that Amy Siskind last week, or maybe even a few days prior to that, don't remember exactly which day it started, tweeted something that I found to be racist and sexist, which is, I will not support white male candidates in the Democratic primary. Unless you slept through the midterms, women were our most successful candidate, biggest Democratic vote getters in history, Obama 08, Hillary 16, white male is not where our party is at, and is our least safe option in 2020. I thought that this was exactly the type of stuff that the left should not engage in. And I immediately tweeted back to her, quote, isn't there something not progressive about preemptively dismissing a candidate based on their race and gender? I feel like there's a word to describe that. As a progressive, I won't be jumping on board with that idea. That was what we knew last week. So as a continuation of this, people started tweeting to me saying, hey, Amy Siskind keeps tweeting about this incident with you. So I said, oh, I've got to see that. I'm not getting those notifications. So I go back to look at Amy Siskind's post about this, and I am welcomed with the reality that she blocked me. You are blocked from following Amy Siskind and viewing Amy Siskind's tweets. The next day, she called Boston College, where I adjunct taught last year, and told them to fire me. Since she had blocked me on Twitter, she went to my personal Facebook page. Remember, I can't see her posts on Twitter. So because she blocked me, she goes to my personal Facebook to tell me that she did this, saying, quote, I called Boston College to launch a complaint that you should not be teaching young minds, but they said you do not teach there. I reported you anyway because you should not be invited back. May want to update your Facebook page to reflect reality. Now, of course, that's true. I'm adjunct faculty. So if I'm not teaching a semester, I'm not employed by Boston College that semester. I'm only employed when I'm actually teaching. What I would be super curious about is, what did she say when she called, right? She said something racist and sexist, saying she would, on the basis of race and gender, preemptively dismiss a candidate. I say, oh, that's racist and sexist. And she calls Boston College to say I should be fired. What does she even claim I did? Like, what explanation do you give to Boston College about why I should be fired? So I tweeted about this on Twitter saying, and then I said, 2 days ago, Amy Siskind posted that she won't vote for white or male candidates in 2020. I pointed out this is racist and sexist. Yesterday, she blocked me on Twitter. Today, she called Boston College demanding they not have me back as adjunct faculty. And as you can see, this generated a lot of activity, 2,000 replies, more than 5,000 retweets, and more than 18,000 likes. And also, Joe Rogan discussed it with comedian Bill Burr on his program. Let's listen to just a little bit of that.
Pull up that tweet that I retweeted today, the David Pakman retweet. David Pakman is this liberal, progressive guy. This woman posts on Twitter she would never vote for a man or a white man or a white person, white or male, someone who's white or male. He says that's racist and sexist. It is. So she blocks him on Twitter. Today she called Boston College demanding that they not have him back as adjunct faculty. It's crazy. So this woman posts this, and he points out that it's racist and sexist. So she blocks him and she tries to get him fired.
Okay, this is why that whole thing is fucked up. Okay, because he's acting like white people exist on an even plane, which a lot of people try to do. So it's like...
But he's not necessarily. He's just saying that what she's saying is racist and sexist.
Yes.
Because she's determining who she's going to vote for based entirely on their race.
Yes, but there's other elements involved. Like the level that white people, not saying all white people, but white people have fucked over people who are not white. Forget about poor white people who they fucked over. So you understand that, but they're both right. But then, like, the fact that she then takes it to the point that because he had the audacity to have a difference of an opinion, that's the thing now, and that now we're going to destroy you and you can't be on this thing.
Right. So Bill Burr, actually, it kind of goes off the rails, but he actually does make good points. I just think that they're points maybe for a different conversation, but that's that. So listen, I'm not saying that this is a huge problem on the left. Many people are telling me Siskind's not even really on the left. She's a former Wall Street person who voted for McCain-Palin in 2008 because Palin's a woman, and started an activist group with all Hillary supporters. So I don't know whether she's strictly speaking on the left or not, but I'm against this type of politics, Pat. I want to evaluate candidates based on platform and issues and ideas, and that's it. Now, I will say, if you have two candidates who are equally qualified, let's say two candidates I agree with 94% of the time, I don't think it's bad to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to vote for the one who is from an underrepresented group. That's not what Amy Siskind suggested in her tweet.
Yeah, there's a lot to flesh out here. I think it warrants a long-form conversation, maybe one that lasts 2 or 3 hours, and you might as well have that conversation on a large platform. So maybe that's a possibility in the future.
Hey, listen, I'm accepting invites, that's for sure. So that's the latest with it, and I don't know how much more we need to say about it, but that's the full story as it exists as of right now. Another day, another liar caught lying in the Trump administration. Many of you know that after forcing Attorney General Jeff Sessions to resign, Donald Trump installed Matthew Whitaker as acting Attorney General. We've already talked about Whitaker's just horrible positions on religion. He previously said he doesn't think anyone who's not a New Testament Christian should be a judge in the United States, lots of other wacky things. He also previously indicated exactly how he would try to stop the Robert Mueller investigation if given a chance to do so. And the Wall Street Journal has now revealed that he is a liar about his credentials. Whitaker claims that when he was playing football at the University of Iowa, he was an academic All-American, so-called. Turns out he wasn't. The claim is on his law firm biography. It's on a resume he sent in 2014 to a patent marketing firm where he applied to work. It's in the documents that the Federal Trade Commission released in November. It was in a 2009 press release by the Department of Justice, and he claimed academic All-American status when he applied to be a judge in Iowa in 2010. The Wall Street Journal contacted the University of Iowa, whose spokeswoman indicated they have no record of Whitaker being an academic All-American during his time there. The organization has their own website, academicallamerika.com. They show no sign of Whitaker being an academic All-American either. So this is notable for a few reasons. One is it's another Trump administration liar. Okay. Number two, being an academic All-American isn't even that impressive. You just need to be an athlete with a 3.3 cumulative GPA. It's not like an insult to athletes or anything. I'm just saying it's a 3.3 GPA and you're an athlete. That's all it is. It's not even an incredible credential if you're applying to be a judge or at a law firm. And what we're learning is that the guy Trump installed to replace Jeff Sessions on an acting basis is a scammer. Not only did he lie about his academic background, he worked with a company that sold time travel technology. He lied on his resume. He's dying to interfere with the Trump administration. And in a sense, this guy is a perfect fit for the Trump administration. But he is a terrible fit for the country. The real problem isn't just that he's lying about his academic credentials. It's that the guy advised a company that was a literal scam, sort of like Trump University, actually, but more so even, and is currently under criminal investigation. The guy running the Justice Department was advising a company that is being criminally investigated right now. At some point, maybe we've already reached that point, do we start assuming everyone in Trump's administration is a scammer or liar until we prove otherwise? The phrase was, I'll have the best people around me or something like that. And in reality, it's quite the opposite that's going on. And if you're going to write to me and say, David, this is a minor thing, or he was part of some other thing, it wasn't academic All-American, but we found the thing he was actually a part of or whatever. If it's not a big deal, why is he lying about it? And as we've talked about with Donald Trump, it's extraordinarily disconcerting when people lie about insignificant things. Because if they're lying about the insignificant things, what are the big things that they're lying about? I do want to hear from you about this. We have a voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. This is so funny. I mentioned at the end of last week that we now have multiple tiers of YouTube membership. We're part of a beta testing feature on YouTube where people can become YouTube members. Originally, there was one pricing tier, which is $4.99. We now have more pricing tiers starting at $1.99, including one called Soy Boy. You can be a beta, an alpha. You can even become David Pakman for $99.99 a month. And a self-confessed drunk caller does not like the membership pricing scheme. Take a listen to this.
David Pakman, MB here from Tippecanoe County. Really have a problem with your, and you're not the only one, with the 99. Here, join for $1.99, $49.99. $100.99. Why don't we just say $2 instead of $1.99? You know, the gas station people, they all do this. I hate it. You know, $2.39.9. It's $2.40 a gallon. Come on. How do I want to say it? It's a misnomer. It's a. Sorry, I've had a couple drinks, but anyway, get over the 99. If it's $1.99 to join, just say $2, please.
This actually is not our choice. So interestingly enough, there's a lot of pricing psychology that asserts that pricing something at $1.99, even though it's only a penny off from $2, people see that it starts with a 1, and at the deepest level of your consciousness, it just seems significantly cheaper than something that is $2.00. So there's like the pricing psychology side of it. We did not choose that all of the prices on the YouTube tiers, YouTube membership tiers, end in 99. That's how YouTube set it up. And we literally could pick anywhere from, I think it was from 99 cents up to $4.99.99. And that's how it works. So it would not be my choice necessarily. On our website, memberships are $6 a month, $12 a month, 24, 48, or 60 for the year or whatever. I get it. This was not our choice. But $1.99 to become a soy boy, I think is pretty good. So check that out on our YouTube channel. But if you're currently a member on our website, if you're currently a patron, everything's fine. You don't need to switch to YouTube membership. It's just an additional option that is out there and exists. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the Supreme Court, discharged from the hospital, recuperating at home after surgery. Utah has lowered its DUI limit to 0.05 from the common 0.08 is a common number in a lot of the country. We will also talk about the stock market's erratic behavior after a 12.2% year-to-date decline, 1,000-point gain yesterday, and then immediately down 400 points intraday right now. An extraordinarily erratic stock market. What does it all mean? What can we predict? Nothing. And much more on today's bonus show. Get the bonus show by becoming a member, becoming a patron. Look forward to speaking to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.